Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Well, it's time to continue our Evil Elite series as I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. If you've been following this series closely, you'll know I've been talking about how we're going to see bigger and bigger names come out and the dominoes continue to fall until we get all the way to the top of the evil elites, and this entire evil agenda of theirs gets exposed and the public is waking up slowly. The Great Awakening, we're seeing it happening. So this week we got the news that Jay-Z's now been named in this big class action as part of this Diddy lawsuit, and this all follows on and ties closely to the whole Epstein saga. Now we know a number of high-profile celebrities have already stepped down or moved out of the country since Trump got elected, and he's vowed to release the Epstein list. But this is another really interesting one. So LeBron, with close ties to both the people mentioned here, Diddy and so on, stepping away from the Lakers as his son gets on the team, and it was his dream to play with him. So a lot of people are confused with all this happening, but no doubt this has got something to do with everything that's happening here. And Kash Patel, he's been very, very clear. It's one subpoena away once the Trump administration gets into power to release the Epstein list, the Diddy files, and all this is finally going to be fully out there for the public, and the elites are going to have nowhere left to hide. Okay, so Nancy Pelosi, another one who's well known for her insider trading and ability to outperform all these legendary investors around the planet. We saw this week that United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was shot, gunned down in broad daylight. Now, this all has ties to Nancy Pelosi possibly being investigated for this insider trading. So this is an old video that's resurfaced with him actually openly discussing working with Nancy Pelosi to secure these grants and so on. So it is tragic when this stuff happens and how the elites work and whatnot. But let's see if justice does come to light here as well. All right, so another great podcaster, influencer who's really rose to fame quickly is Candace Owens. Now, she's been banned in Australia, and I'm going to get to Australia, and I've spoken in the past about how we're in many ways a test bed for all these New World Order, World Economic Forum policies and censorship and so on. But she hasn't been holding back at all lately, and this is a taboo topic that you can get cancelled for and whatnot, but she's just tackling this head on. So she had one of the survivors of the USS Liberty on to talk about how they were openly attacked by Israel, shot at, bombed, torpedoed, napalm dropped on them and everything, and he was one of the survivors. And so this is pretty crazy. Even Lyndon B. Johnson at the time and others as well actually recalled any support, saying, I'm not worried about a few dead soldiers. I don't want to embarrass our greatest ally, Israel. And this is something that we continue to hear to this day, and it all ties into these wars in the Middle East, the New World Order, and all this stuff very tightly connected, and people are finally joining all the dots. Candace has been talking about how the JFK assassination, he wanted AIPAC to register as a foreign agent because AIPAC now control all the US politicians and, likely all the politicians in all these Western countries where they've worked their way up to positions of power and influence to get their way, really. He also wanted to know about Israel's nuclear program, and then shortly after he was assassinated. There's also deep ties to 9/11 with all this stuff, which he's been tackling head on. I'll let you guys look into that in your own time. But there's just so many things coming out now that people are waking up that none of this is just coincidence. You can't just sweep it under the rug anymore or hide behind that shield of anti-Semitism. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as well, because it's important to understand that when we talk about Albo doing these bad things in Australia or whatever, it doesn't mean, people aren't anti-Australian by calling out what the evil elites and the leaders are doing. So just when people call out what the evil leaders of Israel are doing, doesn't mean that people are against Jewish people or Judaism or anything. You have to remember we're talking about the elites, and that's why they like to hide behind this thing and say, oh, that's racist or transphobic or whatever. It's a shield to hide against their actual agenda of what they're trying to push on the population. So don't forget, these Israel, America, CIA, these are the people that all funded these groups in the Middle East initially, and then they kind of get out of control and the weapons get into the wrong hands or whatever, and then they end up killing them as well. And it's just been a complete mess, trillions of dollars of debt, nothing really been accomplished. But this is what the military industrial complex war propaganda machine wants: constant wars. The bankers are always profiting from both sides of the war, those evil elites at the tippy top. And now we see, this war is just out of control. Multiple countries now, and we'll get to the serious stuff in just a second. But anyone that tries to speak out about all this gets cancelled, just like Trump has, and maybe we've got some evidence now we're going to see about the 2020 election that's going to come out as well. But in Romania this week, we saw the election cancelled as this gentleman that's rose to power from absolutely nowhere, a little bit like Trump, really, Karlan Georgescu. So they pulled the election when he was in front saying, oh, it's Russian interference, because an outsider who's calling out all the BS was going to win. And don't forget, he's been very open about the New World Order and saying that these evil elites basically have this satanic anti-human agenda that they're pushing down our throats: depopulation and transgender, all this kind of stuff. So some of our leaders in some countries are not even hiding about this anymore. And Russia has actually banned the satanic temple. Whereas, in the US, we've kind of seen the rise of this stuff, and the music film clips we see these days and whatever. It's just it's really satanic stuff that people are, the elites are trying to normalize for people. And I'm really glad that people are waking up to it all. So let's get over to Syria. So if you've been a follower of this, you'll know the plan in the Middle East has been one by one to attack these different countries and work their way through. And they're now getting towards the end of what they really wanted to accomplish, to try and drag the world into World War III. And so we've seen the overthrow of Assad and these Syrian rebel leaders, again, look into their background and the ties that they have and whatever. It's often, again, the same evil elites playing both sides, trying to drag everyone into war. We have ties to things like resources and gas pipelines and that kind of stuff that the media will cover as well. But at the end of the day, it's all about the elites getting more power over everything. This is really interesting. A pallet of cash showing up in Syria, and the QR codes link back to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. So once again, we know who's really funding all this. It's not the first time it's happened. We've had Gaddafi and leaders like this try to speak out about this. This was in 2009 when he said they're going to engineer these viruses and release them on the public and try and profit. They create the problem and then the solution, and then they implement new laws and whatever to take powers away from the people and your freedoms. So Gaddafi was openly talking about how Obama wanted him dead and whatnot, and that's one thing I've been saying, that don't forget this is going to go all the way to the top. Candace, Owens and others have been digging into the fact that Obama's birth certificate and how he's probably a CIA plant and all this stuff. It's really, really coming out now, and we're just waiting for it to work its way into the mainstream, because it's gone from the conspiracy space to chat rooms and forums to podcasts, and now we're seeing it everywhere on X, Twitter, and it's also on YouTube now. We're just waiting for it to get into mainstream consciousness. James Woods has been brilliant since he joined Twitter, calling out all this stuff. If you don't know what he's talking about here, Joan Rivers was a famous actor who called out Michelle Obama for being trans and that type of thing, and then she was killed shortly after. So all this stuff is going to come out. It goes all the way to the Clintons as well as the Obamas, as I've been talking about, the Bushes, all that Democratic Party that have been in charge are all part of this evil elite's power established pyramid, and it's coming out. So Bill and Hillary Clinton are in talks with Biden to get a pardon for all this preemptive stuff involved with the child trafficking and all this, really terrible stuff that's been going on behind the scenes that people are waking up to. Joe promised not that he wouldn't pardon Hunter Biden, and sure enough, he did that this week. And why has he done that? And why has he gone all the way back to 2014? Well, this is when Hunter was appointed to the board of a Ukraine biolab, and I've spoken about what's really going on in Ukraine. It's not really about that war or whatever. There's so much other stuff going on with money laundering and biolabs and child trafficking. That's why the US is sending so much money to Ukraine. If you're familiar with the conspiracy theory and all the ties to the Clintons and whatnot. Don't forget this is all related to Australia and these 400,000 missing kids just this year in the US alone, 8 million kids a year missing. This is all part of this elite child trafficking network that they're running. And we've even seen in Australia, and now people have done their research, and some of the Clintons' friends and their campaign donors and so on, they were in these regions where kids are going missing, and researchers are going out there and joining all these dots. So let's hope justice gets served there. Joe Biden has already granted clemency to convicted pedos. So it's really wild. Most people have no idea stuff like this is happening with all this horrific crimes and whatever, and then you get a pardon. Crazy to think that this is being normalized. Now, Biden's also, the Democrats are desperate to try and do everything they can before Trump gets inaugurated in January to cover up everything that they've been doing, this evil agenda. So Biden's extended that emergency declaration for the vaccines to give the makers indemnity protection against any damages or whatever that might be coming out. So another crazy thing that's going to upset a lot of people. We now know that the FBI had 29 informants in Washington on January 6 when they stormed the Capitol. So it was really the insiders that were pushing for this to happen, and then turning around and trying to blame Trump. Okay, so we also know BlackRock is at the tippy top of all this agenda. And with everything we're seeing, it's really about inversion and lying. And that's all part of the, satanic connection, inverting stuff and lying to people and so on. And so BlackRock is lying now about buying up all these family homes and real estate in the US. And we've got the Trump administration, Tucker, all these truth, freedom fighters and calling the shots as it really is. So, let's hope that this comes out as well, because we don't want BlackRock buying up. It's crazy. I hope it doesn't happen here in Australia where property is already unaffordable. How can we let these trillion-dollar asset managers compete with average Joe who just wants to buy his first house and so on? Now, if in the conspiracy world, you'll know that the theory's always gone, as the evil elites lose control or whatnot, or the last stages of their master plan has always been to drag us to World War III or even fake, UFO alien invasion of some type. And around America, you'll notice on Twitter this week, these are some good time lapses, but obviously we don't know what these are, but the drone activity or the UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, this has been everywhere, particularly across New Jersey, and it's even made mainstream media in America now. So, is this just another scare, fake distraction? Probably most likely, but it's interesting to watch nonetheless. And I even know people, in Australia recently that are non-believers at all that have sort of said, hey, I've been seeing a few things in the sky that I can't explain. So something is happening. I think we all feel it. There's a big change in the air. Something is coming. Okay, so we've seen in Britain, the UK, them flip out of nowhere on a few issues lately with immigration last week, and now announcing that they're banning these puberty blockers in kids under 18. So obviously that's a huge step in the right direction. J.K. Rowling's been calling out all this BS for a while now. We finally get a big study and then it goes unpublished because it's politically incorrect. This is what science has got to. This just shows that politics is now above science and truth. So thankfully some places are starting to roll over on this, but it's really all part of this crazy Orwellian agenda. We've got this teacher that's been in jail for nearly 2 years for refusing to use a pronoun, and yet Biden is giving pardons to pedos, and we're releasing those sort of people from prison. Let's move to Australia now, speaking of Orwellian, where some of these books are now being banned from classrooms because can you imagine reading this these days and being asked to study it when it's basically all come true? The surveillance state, the censorship, the Orwellian nature, throwing people in jail that speak up against the government, all this type of stuff. So they're banning these books while they're pushing, the trans books and that on our kids in primary school. It's just insane stuff. And Aussies need to wake up because we haven't got someone like Trump and all his team of freedom fighters in power in Australia yet. So I'm really, I really hope Australians do wake up and share these videos around. Matt Barry did a brilliant article this week about everything that Australia's doing wrong. You guys know I did that video 5 years ago about how we've got a huge crisis coming if we don't stop blowing a housing bubble, and our economic diversity, we're somewhere like 100 and something on that list now, where we just don't manufacture things and we just don't have that innovation and that type of thing. We're so one-dimensional with mining a housing bubble that's all fueled by the banks. As always, it gets back to the banks. Okay, so this is really topical stuff, and it ties back to everything we spoke about earlier in this video with Israel and Candace Owens calling them out and Candace being banned from Australia. So Australia, for the first time, backed the UN to call for a ceasefire in Gaza, because it's pretty obvious to most people that are looking with an unbiased eye that it's just genocide when you see the sheer number of people that are dying, women and children, and what's going on there. And so for Australia to actually pull out, and then that really upset Netanyahu. And he said Australia is opening itself up to terrorist attack and calling us anti-Semitic and whatnot. And sure enough, we did get a fire in a Melbourne synagogue, and it's been treated as a terror attack. But I just don't think any of this is coincidence, and it's meant to kind of, as always, fuel the flames and create division and whatever. Guys, everyone should be kind to everyone else and turn off the TV and stop trying to pick sides and that type of thing. So we had Elbow meet and to talk about this combating anti-Semitism and whatnot, $150 million commitment. But you've got to realize who's in power. So why is one side getting special treatment and others aren't? We saw these teens attack Christmas carols in Brighton. So, do they do press conferences, and does the Christian community get $100 million to fight the racism against them and that type of thing? It's just so one-sided and biased with everything that's going on at the moment. It shows you probably that our government has been who's really pulling the strings here as well. Okay, so the misinformation bill did get pulled from Parliament on 7th of November, but just 2 weeks later, it's been reintroduced under a different name. So they're still fully trying to push all this censorship stuff here as well. We know that they've rolled out this under 16s social media ban, but yet they're still going to allow things like Pornhub. It just shows you that the real agenda isn't protecting kids. This is the real agenda, the digital ID and all these things that you're going to have to agree to through the My ID app. How scary is this that they're going to have your biometrics and all that type of thing as well in their system? Speaking of the big banks, not happy with nearly $10 billion in profit. They're going to start charging you to withdraw your cash. And as you know, that's if you can get your cash. If you've gone into a bank and tried to get out money recently, you'll know that they're going to ask you, well, what's it for? Who's it's going to? Why are you doing this? It's not your money, guys. When you put your money into a bank, it is now theirs. And I'm going to do an episode shortly about the crypto related stuff, because there's now companies where you can get good crypto debit cards, and you effectively don't even need to be banked or have a bank in Australia or any country anymore if you understand how to operate in the world of crypto properly. So everything that's happening in Australia, it's like we're watching a movie play out to wake people up to what's going on. Similar to everything that happened during COVID. But here we have in Australia this news that we've had these deadly virus samples being leaked. We don't know where they are, and so on. I feel like, as I said, I'm watching a movie sometimes as these headlines come out. Another really topical one. So this is something where the shoppers in the UK have been boycotting any dairy products, meat products, and so on that use bovia, which is this chemical which is supposedly reducing CO2 by cattle emissions, cow farts and that type of thing. So comes with this long list of dangerous side effects. It hasn't had any long-term studies, all the usual stuff. But what people don't realize, and what I posted about on Facebook, was this was implemented in Australia a year ago quietly, and people didn't notice. So have you been giving this to yourself, your kids, your family, so on? Did you know that was a thing? I think people are going to start to boycott those products here. And we're already seeing people demand answers on who's using this stuff and who isn't. In terms of climate change, you know, let's be honest, the real focus is control, the same New World Order agenda. When you look at charts like this and how much China's CO2 emissions and Australia's, the real problem is pollution. And this is the elite's distraction. So while all these big corporates are pumping out all these plastic bottles and so on, but blaming, cows and things, that have been in nature forever, we're the problem apparently. We should be focusing on the microplastics, the toxic chemicals, the herbicides and pesticides that go into the waterways. There's all these things that are real that are harming the environment. And yet the elite have decided that we're going to blame carbon and we're going to make it all about carbon credits and so on. And we're going to blame people and slowly tell you what you can't eat anymore, you can't travel, and it's all your problem and so on, while they're all still flying around the world in their jets and whatnot. So the gas coming out of my cows is not as nearly as dangerous as the BS coming out of our government and our leaders, from Bill Gates and all those at the top. Some positive news in Australia in relation to crypto. We've seen Australia's retirement fund invest 27 million. Huge fund manager here in Australia. And one by one, as I've said, everyone else is just finally going to wake up and get into Bitcoin as the best method of saving, as everything else looks like it's going to hyperinflate away. Texas has introduced their strategic reserve on the state level. We know Trump's been talking about a crypto strategic reserve on the national level, and we've also seen Trump buying altcoins this week in his wallets. Now, this video was super popular that we did with Philip the other day. You guys have been raving about this indicator where he gives weekly updates for us. Check that interview out I did with him if you haven't already, where he's become one of the number one copy traders as well now. So if you want that research and all our research, guys, don't forget to head over to nuggetsnews.com.au. You can sign up for our free newsletter, all our research, or our VIP tier for high net worths. Hope you guys have enjoyed that one. Smash that like button, share this video around, and I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.